It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
There are some really hard topics that we have to talk about now and then. This one is one that I think children should listen to. However, we are going to be talking about body safety and red flags around that, and particularly the topic of grooming. So if you want to listen to it first and get some tips so that you know how to talk to your kids about it, I get it. Here's your little warning so that you can press pause and save it for later. However, like I said, this is a really safe conversation and one that children, I reckon, need to hear pretty much at all ages, because unfortunately there are occasionally some people out there who are not safe. My guest on today's podcast is Jayneen Sanders. Jayneen is easier to Google. Jayneen. Jayneen Sanders. Educator, former teacher, written so many books around so many topics for kids, and they are kids' books. We used to sell them in the Happy Families store. I don't know why we're not doing that anymore. We should do that again. They were always really popular. Great books. And Jay joins me on the podcast today to talk about body safety red flags. Hey, so good to have you here, Jay.
Thank you so much for having me, Justin. Very important topic, and I'm glad I'm here to talk about it today.
Yeah, let's dig straight in. When we talk about body safety, what are we talking about?
These are very age-appropriate, essential skills to keep children safe from sexual abuse. As I said, age-appropriate, and it will lessen the likelihood that will be targeted by a sexual predator.
Yeah, how likely is it that our children will be targeted? Do we have Aussie stats? I know I've seen some stuff. I'd love to know what you've been reading.
Yeah, there's a new stat out recently. It's 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys will be sexually abused before they're 18.
Yeah, and every parent in Australia's jaw just dropped.
Yes. So, and teachers, look in your classrooms as well. So those kids in front of you, like 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 5 boys, sexually abused before 18. And these are only the statistics we know about.
Yeah, of course, because it's underreported.
And, 95% of them will know their perpetrator. So they are in your homes, they are in your communities, they are there.
Okay, so this is an unpopular thing to have to answer, but when we look statistically at who poses the most danger to our kids, what stats have you read and what do parents need to know about this?
Well, children under the age of 8, I believe it's more likely to be a family member. But we're also seeing an increase in adolescent child-on-child abuse as well because of the prevalence of pornography. Kids seem to be more and more outplaying what they're saying. So there has been that increase in older children abusing kids, but often, it can be a family member or someone close to the child, like a coach or even a teacher, dare I say.
Yeah.
I mean, perpetrators, we have to understand the perpetrators go where children are. So they will be in our homes and our communities. And also, there is a lot more online grooming as well, but that is for offline abuse as well. So your child might be happily talking to someone you think is marvellous, but they're planning to meet them offline to sexually abuse them.
Let me pick up 3 of those threads you've just shared and maybe add some colour to the tapestry that we're weaving here. Recently on the podcast, we had a law professor from Queensland University of Technology who has just put together a huge study looking at sexual abuse in Australia. And his report showed that adolescent, as you said, child-on-child sexual abuse, it's one of the biggest challenges, one of the biggest threats that our young people face now. Second thing that research showed is that biological parents are the least likely to be involved in abuse, but if there is a non-biological male in the home, and I know this is such an unfair, and there are so many good men who are in step families who just look after those kids like they are their very own. But unfortunately, there are too many who are not good and significant
Can I add
risk of
another
harm.
statistic there? Sorry, Justin, but this is a doozy. I think a child in a single parent home is 20 times more likely to be sexually abused, and a child with a disability is 2.2 times more likely to be sexually abused.
They're not nice numbers to hear, especially because we know that, let's say, single mums, for example, are already doing it hard enough. It's not about shame and guilt. It's really about saying, be aware, because these are Massive, massive red flags. The other thing that I wanted to highlight here is just the relationship between age and abuse. So all the data that I've seen over the decades shows that the younger your child is, the greater the likelihood of abuse. As they get older, your children become less likely to be abused. Of course, there is still the possibility that it could happen, but kids under 2 are the most likely, followed by kids under 5, followed by kids under 8, followed by kids under 10 or 11. And then once they get into their adolescent years, the likelihood drops off quite substantially there because, well, they've learned how to protect themselves better. They're just less vulnerable. Here's the hard...
never too young to start teaching your kids body safety, which is age appropriate. And it's a different kind of abuse too. Like younger children, they're using the kind of the threats and the secrecy. Whereas with older kids, it's more about, I see no one's listening to you. It's more love-based. I really care about you. I'm in love with you. So the kind of the type of abuse shifts.
Makes my skin crawl hearing you even say it. It's just awful. Here's the hard question, and this is where we really need to spend the bulk of our time in this conversation, Jay. If I'm a parent and I'm listening to this conversation, I'm going, oh my goodness, 1 in 3, 1 in 5, 18, under the age of 2, just like all of these numbers and these awful realities. First of all, how do I teach this to my child? How do I teach body safety to my child? And we need to do this in a developmentally appropriate way. So let's start with our younger children and then move into slightly older children.
Okay. Now, keeping in mind, I am a parent, but my children are adults. But I did this too. I mean, I taught body safety to my kids. So we begin as soon as your child is born, you start to use the correct names for the body. You have penis, a vulva, vagina. You use the correct terms. Don't shy away from them. A, because we don't want our kids to be ashamed of those terms. B, if it ever was a chance that the child was sexually abused, they could tell you exactly where. 3, they need to know exactly these terms in order for this to hold any volition in a court of law. And the 4th one is that if your child says no or stop to a perpetrator or uses the correct term, they go, oh my gosh, this child has been educated with the correct terms and they're educated to tell.
So how do we do that? I mean, obviously, when you're in the bath with the kids, you say, do you want me to wash you, or are you happy to wash you? And then you'll use the appropriate terminology. Yeah. But beyond that, what other strategies do we have outside of we're in the bathroom and we're giving the kids a wash because they're not quite big enough to wash themselves?
Okay, well, that's the beginning. So then from there, when they're under 2 and they're not verbal, you would talk about what you're doing with their body. Like, oh, I'm just putting your socks on because, it's really cold outside and we need some warm, woolly socks. So you're talking about what you're doing around their body. Now, they can't speak back to you, of course, but you are not just putting their socks on or putting their singlet on. You're telling them about what is actually happening within that body space. Then as they become more verbal, you teach them about what they have a body boundary. Now, a body boundary is an invisible space around their body, and just because it's invisible doesn't mean it isn't there. So people need to ask consent before they enter into your body boundary. So you can't just come along as a grandma and just give that child a hug and grab them. You need to ask, can I have a hug? This is hard for some older people in my age bracket because, they're used to just saying, hey, my grandchild, I'm just going to.
They grab that kid and they pick him up and they squeeze him. I'm going to grab that kid and give a hug.
But hey, right. What are you teaching them? You're teaching them that their voice doesn't matter, that their rights don't matter. Now, they might not be in the mood for a hug like we all sometimes aren't in the mood for a hug. So by asking them, can I have a hug? They have a choice. They can hug you. Yes, happily. That's consent. Or they can say, no, I'll give you a high five, but not today.
Now,
that's okay.
I think it's worth jumping in here, Jay, and just highlighting a lot of people hear this and they say, oh my goodness, this is excessive. This is over the top. Of course they want to hug their grandparents. And my response to that is, yeah, they do. You can almost bet your boots that they do. But it's so easy to say, are we hugging today? Are you ready for a great big hug? Like you can invite them in and in any typically developing normal, healthy relationship, that kiddo's going to say, bring it on. They're going to run into your arms and give you a great big hug. You know what? I do the same thing with my wife. I say,
of course you do.
Can I give you a kiss? Or do you feel like hugging, or do you want some space? It's a really simple thing to just check in, and you're met with that warmth and that delight 99.9% of the time.
And you're modeling that to your children too, Justin, which is great. You're modeling that language of consent. And because, if I were a grandmother, I would love that I asked my child for a hug, a grandchild for a hug, and they said yes enthusiastically rather than just taking it.
Yep.
It's so much more rewarding when they really do want to give you that warm, gorgeous hug.
You're right. It enriches the experience. Even when let's say I'm giving a presentation at a conference or something like that, people will often come up and say, can I get a photo? Can we get a selfie so I can show the kids that I was with the guy on Channel 9's TV show? And as we pose for the photo, I'll often say, are we touching or are we not touching? Because people will very often want to put their arms around my shoulder or have that sense of closeness. But I mean, you're never going to just throw your arm around someone and do that. And people always look at me and laugh and go, oh, yeah, of course, because they've already got their arm around me or whatever.
That's right.
But as you said,
so body boundaries and consent.
The modeling, the modeling emphasizes the boundary and the consent, and it makes the experience richer. People think it's going to detract from it, but it makes it better.
Absolutely. And that way you're teaching this language of consent from a very young age, which is only going to be fabulous for when your children become teenagers and when they become adults. When, consent is very, very important. So right now, when they're little, we're just talking about consent in terms of their body boundary. So there's nothing to do with anything to do with sex. It's all about just respecting their rights to be greeted or hugged or touched when it's their choice.
But even when you're tickling them, they say, stop. Playful
tickling.
touch is still, I mean, my kids love it. But when they say stop, I'm like, okay, I'll stop. But you tell me when you want to go again. And we'll have tickle wars, and it's delightful and it's wonderful. But there's got to be a willingness to stop when the kids have had enough, and then to dive back in when they're ready to go again.
Well, tickling is actually one of the perpetrators' grooming techniques because it's a way to desensitize a child. Tickle, tickle, tickle. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to touch you there. Tickle, tickle, tickle. Didn't. Oh, did it again. It's a way to desensitize children. So absolutely, if you're tickling a child and they're having a great time and they say stop, you stop.
I don't even know if I want to tickle my kids. That's just awful, isn't it? I can't believe that.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to do that. Like this is a great way to play with your children, but it has to be that your child is consenting. Your child is happy about this. And that's what you need to do. So the next thing after body boundaries and consent is you need to have a safety network. So your child needs to have 3 to 5 adults. One should not be in the family that they would go to whenever they feel unsafe. Now they can, it can be a teacher, it can be mum or dad, but it has to be their choice. Now you might think, oh, they're going to put me and put dad. Well, they may not. They may put you and they might put their grandma. So they pick 3 to 5 adults to be on their safety network. We usually put it on a hand. We outline the child's hand and they write the people that they want on their safety network hand, and that is put in a prominent position so that anyone entering your home knows that you're doing body safety with your children and these are the people on their safety network. So that is a very important part of it.
Jay, there's even more protective behaviours. You've written all about them in a brand new book called Body Safety Red Flags. It's such a big topic and it's such a confronting one. I think this is this kind of thing where parents would say, I do need some guidance. I do need some help. This is why you write, right?
Absolutely. It's exactly why I write, and I write always on body safety and consent. I have another book called My Body, What I Say Goes, and if I had to choose one book for every parent to read to their child, it would be that book because it has all these skills that I was outlining. Particularly, there's another one as well, difference between secrets and surprises. So all of that is in the book, and children are visual learners. So this is such a great way to unpack and have these ongoing discussions with your children. There's never just one discussion, it's ongoing. And what a great way if you're having these open conversations with your children from a young age. As they get older, guess what? They're going to come to you because you're their safe person. You're their person who they can talk to about anything. So there is no downside to this.
The book is called Body Safety Red Flags. You can pre-order it now at Jay's website. Jay, what are the details for people who want to get this and your other resources? Because you've got about 20 or 30 books you've written now, and they're all useful.
They're all useful. Yes, indeed. Now, if you have little children from 2 to 6, we have a pack called Little Big Chats, which has that in. But you can get all my books and free resources. There's actually a free poster that you could put on a body safety rules poster. You could put on your refrigerator. Again, sends a sign to any perpetrators in your house that your kids are educated to tell. But the website is www.e2 with the numeral 2 epublishing.info. All there for you.
So that's www.e2epublishing.info.
That's it.
All right. We'll link to that in the show notes. Jay Sanders is an author, an educator, a former teacher, and someone who cares deeply about your kids and their safety and welfare. The book, Body Safety Red Flags. So glad we got to have this conversation. I hope that everybody buys it and talks to their young ones about it, because I can't believe I just said young ones. That makes me feel like I'm about 15 years older than I really am. Gee whiz. Talk to your kids about it. Gosh. Hey, Jay, thanks so much for joining me, even if I'm sounding like I'm too old to be doing this.
And me.
Oh, my goodness. Hey, have a great day and really appreciate the input. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rullon from Bridge Media. Once again, we'll link to all of Jay's resources in our show notes. And if you'd like to know more about that previous podcast I hinted at, we will also link to that one in the show notes, and a whole lot more information about making your family happier and safer at happyfamilies.com.au.